This is CNN.
No huff about Clarence Thomas's confession he once puffed pot. Are we witnessing the mellowing of the U.S. political scene?
There's an air of optimism as superpower diplomats try to come to terms on an arms control treaty.
Eyes to the skies. A solar eclipse creates a spectacular show above the Earth.
And this Florida grandmother caught the AIDS virus from a healthcare worker. Her life's work trying to prevent the same thing from happening again. I'm Frank Sesno.
I'm Catherine Cryer. From CNN, this is The World Today.
Thanks for joining us. We begin with what is really a story about a generation with its roots in the turbulent 60s and early 70s when youthful experimentation was the order of the day. More narrowly, the story is about Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas. The 43-year-old conservative judge admits he smoked marijuana in college and law school. The White House calls the episode inconsequential. Most senators appear to agree. CNN's Tony Collins now on Clarence Thomas and his time.
As Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas paid courtesy calls on influential senators, questions followed him about his admitted casual use of marijuana as a college student. Will it hurt him?
No, it's been dealt with, guys. Thank you.
The White House says Thomas took several puffs of marijuana while at Holy Cross College some 20 years ago, and perhaps again at Yale Law School.
It should be a lesson. Don't try it at any point in your life, ever.
White House counsel C. Boyden Gray said experimental student use is not disqualifying. Some Senate Judiciary Committee members agreed that a youthful brush with marijuana should not be held against him.
That's the reality of life. The casual use of certainly marijuana is not a bar to being a jet pilot or a navigator or perhaps even President of the United States.
The Senate Minority Leader doesn't see Thomas's confirmation going up in smoke.
I don't believe it will. That's my judgment. I've been wrong before, but I don't believe it will.
The White House says it knew about Thomas's marijuana use before he was nominated. Thomas had revealed it in an FBI investigation preceding his confirmation last year to the U.S. Appeals Court. In 1987, Douglas Ginsburg withdrew as a Reagan administration Supreme Court nominee when his use of marijuana became public. But Ginsburg had used the illegal drug as recently as 7 years before his nomination while a law school professor. His drug use had not emerged from his FBI background check. Thomas's Senate sponsor doubts that his drug use will cost him any votes.
If for people in their 30s and 40s we were to rule out any experimentation with marijuana while they were in college, we would have a widespread exodus from the government and from a lot of other positions.
It is perhaps a sign of the times that even some groups strongly opposed to drugs see no problem with Thomas's youthful experimentation. So far, it is only a puff of smoke on his resume, not a storm cloud. Anthony Collins, CNN, Capitol Hill.
It is, of course, Thomas's ideology that sparks most controversy, his positions on civil rights and abortion in particular. The National Women's Political Caucus meeting in Washington is considering a resolution opposing the Thomas nomination. CNN political analysts Jack Germond and David Broder will join us later this hour to discuss the controversial nomination and other matters political. Catherine.
After nearly a decade of sometimes torturous arms control talks, the U.S. and Soviet Union are inching toward the finish line, finishing up a treaty to slash the number of nuclear missiles on both sides. As CNN World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter reports, a top Soviet official is in Washington for a final round of talks.
Soviet Foreign Minister Alexander Bezmetnev's first stop was the White House to give President Bush the word that Moscow really wants to wrap up the strategic missile treaty and set a date for a Bush-Gorbachev summit.
Inconvenient. We did it on very, very short notice, and I think it demonstrates President Gorbachev's interest, your interest, Moishov's interest in reaching a corridor and start, which is important to both our countries. So thank you very, very much for coming. And I think the American people see this as a significant step of principle by the Soviet Union. And I want to encourage that view because that's exactly what it is.
Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has been struggling with military and KGB conservatives over the last details of the treaty to reduce long-range nuclear arsenals by about one-third. After the White House talks, it was apparent the Kremlin is eager to conclude the treaty.
The result would depend on the willingness and the preparedness of both sides to make an extra centimeter in their movement, not an extra mile, but also an extra inch, because the distance is not so great.
One of the toughest details is how to decode secret transmissions from Soviet missiles, which could help the U.S. determine if the Kremlin is cheating on the treaty. The United States insists on settling that issue before signing the treaty.
It always gets tougher as you get to the end game. I think you know that. And while these issues that we're now dealing with are technical issues, they're very important issues. But we're not going to rush it. We're not going to push it beyond what we think is reasonable and prudent because it's too important.
U.S. officials believe Soviet negotiators have had their hands tied by conservatives in the military who fear the Kremlin is giving away too much. But Besnetnik now is signaling that problem has been overcome.
And we have the position, we have the authority, and we have the will to finish the job. If General Moiseev or myself were not prepared to discuss deeply the issues and to take the decisions, we would rather stay in Moscow and think again.
The Soviet foreign minister and Baker spent the first 2 hours of their talks in large group meetings, significant because it means the reluctant Soviet chief of military staff won't be able to accuse anyone of deal-making behind his back. President Bush told reporters at his main vacation retreat he sees no evidence that Mr. Gorbachev is compromising on arms control in order to buy Western economic aid. Captain?
Ralph, it's unlikely there are a lot of people sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for the outcome of this. Can you give us a little perspective? How big a deal is this?
Well, I think you're right. I don't think a lot of people are just wondering what's going on in these negotiations. This is one of those cases where the U.S. and Soviet Union have to put behind them 10 years of negotiation on this arms control treaty. U.S. officials fear that if Mikhail Gorbachev is not around for another few months or perhaps another year, this treaty will never be signed. They want to get it out of the way now. Getting it out of the way will allow President Bush and Mr. Gorbachev to move on to other issues, such as helping pursue the reforms in the Soviet Union and helping to rebuild the Soviet economy.
Thank you, Ralph Begleiter at the State Department. And ahead on the world today, when the sun, moon, and earth line up just so, this is what happens. We'll have the latest on an incredible eclipse. We'll also tell you what ECX is and why the Atlantic Richfield Company is so excited about it. And coming up later, an unsettling assessment of the state of the world's oil reserves, details on the splitting up of a pair of collared crusaders, and a roundtable survey of the current political scene. Stay with us.
The World Today with Frank Chesno and Catherine Pryor. An hour of news, interviews, and debate. The what and the why in The World Today.
High in the mountains of France, near a village called Combloux, there's a source of clean, crystal clear water. It's as refreshing as any on earth. That water doesn't flow from some mountain peak or through a small hidden valley. It's not bottled by men who work 9 to 5. It flows from an ordinary faucet that's connected to an extraordinary filter. One of the Instapure water filters from Teledyne Water Pit.
Business kept us on the road for days, and I was hard-pressed for a good deal on a rental car. But some guys in the airport might take me to the cleaners. Suddenly, everything fell into place.
Dollar Rent-A-Car is right on the airport, right on the money. Great rates, unlimited mileage.
Then I see something in a compact.
Call 1-800-800-4000.
Phone called Popular Science. Love those.
Look at this.
They're still filming here.
What are you going to do with it?
The more important the photo, the more reason to trust it to others.
It's better than some kid with a mop.
It wasn't a mop. It was a fiery horse. The speed of light.
I hope silver away!
Looks like a mop to me.
He's glad there is one red note. That looks yummy. It's nothing, honey. Mr. Medina. So, volunteer molasses.
Oh, baby, I love it when you lie to me.
When you need the latest news, business, and sports, updated every 30 minutes around the clock, you need CNN Headline News. Anytime, all the time.
It's an ageless celestial spectacular from the moon, briefly blotting out the sun. CNN's Al Hinman reports on the excitement created by the world's latest solar eclipse.
Eclipse mania gripped hundreds of thousands, hoping to see day turn to night.
At the time of total eclipse, I'm not going to care about science and the moon and how far away. I just want to be washed over by that emotion.
The curiosity was contagious as the celestial countdown got underway.
I think it's going to be really neat, and I'm looking forward to watching it.
Sun seekers crowded Pacific resorts from Hawaii to Mexico in search of the best front row seats for the solar sight of their lifetime. Many Hawaiians feared the then still mysterious eclipse when the last one occurred in 1850.
It was a time in which perhaps a great chief would die, or that the gods were angry and had swallowed the orb, and that calamity would be the result.
Solar eclipses are no longer such a mystery. The Earth, moon, and sun line up directly, with the moon blocking the sun's path. Scientists and astronomers hope to learn a great deal more about the sun and its atmosphere during this eclipse. Thousands of experiments and research projects were underway, including a special rocket launch from the Baja coast of Mexico. With a cluster of major observatories on the Big Island of Hawaii, this was the first ever solar eclipse to pass directly overhead. Clouds carrying volcanic dust from the Mount Pinatubo volcano in the Philippines partially obscured the sun, but not the view through the special observatory cameras. In the final moments before totality, the so-called diamond ring effect, as the last rays of the sun shine through a cratered gap in the moon. Temperatures drop at least 5 degrees in minutes, as daytime mimics night under a full moon.
It got so dark and so cold.
Loved it. The drama was exceptional.
I felt it in my body, in my soul. It was almost kind of a primal feeling when the darkness came upon me.
1,200 years ago, a Mayan priest astronomer in Mexico predicted the exact day and location for a solar eclipse, this eclipse. More people were expected to watch this eclipse than any before. They watched even when they knew their eclipse view would not be total.
We're seeing a moon. It looks like a moon. The sun looks like a moon now. It's about, 40% covered maybe?
Yeah. For those who missed the solar show, the next chance for North America, August 21st, the year 2017. Al Hinman, CNN, reporting.
That's a long time to wait. U.S. officials have ruled out hostile actions or sabotage in a chain reaction explosion today at an ammunition depot on the main American air base outside Kuwait City. They believe an electrical short in the ammunition truck probably led to the explosions and fire. At least 50 U.S. soldiers and 6 British soldiers were injured. The blast also damaged as many as 40 combat vehicles at the site.
A Nigerian Airways jetliner exploded and crashed Thursday while attempting an emergency landing near Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. All aboard the plane, at least 261 people were killed. The DC-8 was chartered from a Canadian company. It exploded about 60 miles north of Jeddah. Most of the victims were Nigerian Muslim pilgrims leaving Mecca. Saudi officials say the pilot requested permission to return to Jeddah only minutes after takeoff, reporting a fire in the landing gear. The plane exploded seconds before landing. Federal investigators in Alabama don't yet know what caused the crash of a commuter jetliner in Birmingham. Investigators recovered the cockpit voice recorder from the wreckage on Thursday. 13 people died when the Beechcraft C-99 crashed and burned during a storm on Wednesday. 2 homes were leveled in the fiery crash. The aircraft belonged to Express Airlines, a 2-year-old carrier that filed for bankruptcy this year.
And ahead on the world today, a political quandary for Democrats as they decide whether to investigate charges of a Reagan campaign hostage deal with Iran.
Jack Patton, publisher of Business Week.
I'm proud that so many leading companies advertise in our pages. American Express, AT&T, General Motors. Business Week ad pages read like the who's who of business. Why do so many successful companies choose our pages to tell their stories? Because they're trying to reach people like you, people who are successful themselves, or well on their way to being there. Just look at the numbers. You see, I'm just as proud of our readers, too, because they help make Business Week the world's #1 business magazine. America's most successful business people read Business Week because it's simply the best source for objective reporting and thoughtful analysis of the week's business news. From international trade to personal finance, they get the full story in our pages every week. And that brings me to your subscription to Business Week. Whether you've already arrived or on the way up, you should subscribe to Business Week right now. You will be an excellent company.
Now is the time to subscribe to Business Week, because right now you can get 28 issues of Business Week for the low rate of $24.95, a savings of more than 64% off the cover price. It's all the business news you need every week, the kind of value real success is built on. And with your paid subscription, Business Week will send you the compact data bank, absolutely free. The data bank is more than a calculator. It also stores all your important phone numbers and doubles as a digital clock. Remember, it's free with your paid subscription to Business Week. Here's how to subscribe. Call 1-800-862-5500, and we'll send you 28 issues of Business Week for only $24.95. That's just 89 cents an issue, $45 off the cover price. Or get a full year of Business Week for just $10 more. That's 51 issues for only $34.95. And with your subscription, you'll get 2 special issues, including the Business Week Top 1000. Either way, your satisfaction is guaranteed, and the data bank is free with your paid subscription. That number again is 1-800-862-5500. Call now.
Another complication for Robert Gates, the president's nominee to head the Central Intelligence Agency. The Senate Intelligence Committee is delaying confirmation hearings while it seeks answers to new questions about Gates' possible role in the Iran-Contra affair. Those questions were raised by the guilty plea Tuesday of Alan Fires. The former CIA official told prosecutors he and 3 other top CIA officials knew key details about the affair as early as mid-1986. One of those officials reported directly to Gates. But when he appeared before the committee in 1987, Gates maintained he had no knowledge of the operation until much later. Congressional sources say a lengthy delay could imperil the nomination.
There's a saying that generals refight old wars. But could Congress refight old political campaigns? That's the dilemma Democrats face on Capitol Hill. Should they investigate allegations regarding Ronald Reagan's 1980 campaign and the U.S. hostages held in Iran, the so-called October surprise? CNN's Candy Crowley reports.
Did the 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign conspire with Iranian officials to delay the release of U.S. hostages in Tehran until after the November election? Did William Casey, then Reagan campaign manager, later the CIA director, set up the deal?
I can't imagine anybody doing such a traitorous thing as trying to keep Americans in hostage. I can't believe that.
But another former Carter official, Mideast expert Gary Sick, who resurrected the issue 3 months ago, believes there's something there. He can't prove it, but he thinks Congress might be able to. It's a politically dicey suggestion.
It would look like a possible witch hunt if the Democrats went after the source and there's no evidence. If, however, there is any indication that Ronald Reagan or George Bush knew about this, then the story is explosive. We're talking Watergate.
On the other hand, we could be talking Iran-Contra, congressional hearings which turned on some of the Democratic panel members, tried the public's patience, and made a hero out of Oliver North.
If there's an attempt to go immediately to the regulators to say, was George Bush in Paris in 1980? Did he strike a deal? Was he knowledgeable about Phil Casey's involvement with the Iranians? Then I think they're going to overshoot immediately, and it just won't work.
Politically risky, but some on Capitol Hill think it's necessary.
If we investigate carefully and thoroughly and come up with nothing, then so be it. That'll satisfy me to at least to the extent that we've done what we can to find out the truth. But if we turn up with nothing, I'm afraid a lot of people are going to say it was a political witch hunt.
People, like former Reagan campaign official and Attorney General Ed Meese.
And I think that if we're going to have congressional inquiries and full-blown investigations every time either kooks or liars or people with their own political axe to grind start coming out with these kinds of false charges, then we're going to have a lot of congressional investigations.
The Democrats' dilemma also includes the calendar. Opening up a 10-year-old case a year before a presidential election may take some explaining. Sensitivities are obvious. Possible presidential candidate Albert Gore declined requests for an interview, despite the fact that just 2 weeks ago he was on the Senate floor calling for an investigation.
I believe the air needs to be cleared, Mr. President.
The decision on whether to proceed seems to lie with House Speaker Tom Foley, who'll decide later this month. At the moment, he says he's inclined to push for some sort of inquiry. He is, in the words of one aide, damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Most of Foley's Democratic colleagues, meanwhile, remain firmly on the fence, reluctant to say no, and not the least bit eager to say yes. Candy Crowley, CNN on Capitol Hill.
And just ahead on the world today, pot and politics, a CNN roundtable on some burning issues, including Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas. We'll be back.
On CNN tonight, one of the big guns in Hollywood's heyday, but how is Warner Brothers faring today on Moneyline? Then, the valid science efforts for wasted tax dollars, the U.S. space station in the crossfire. All tonight on CNN. Time magazine called him the master funny man of the age. Now, for the first time ever, the legendary king of comedy and music is captured on video in the best of Victor Borge.
Pardon me, madam, are you laying eggs?
Recorded live, this collector's edition of Priceless Comedy is a must for every Victor Borge fan. It's the incomparable Victor Borge in his best loved, most heartwarming comedy performance of all time. The best of Victor Borge on VHS is only $19.95 plus $3.95 postage and handling. To order your personal copy, you must act now. Moon River, Holly Golightly, and Kisses in the Rain make Breakfast at Tiffany's one of our favorite movies. Tonight on TNT.
Today we have another of our periodic political roundtables, talking with CNN's eminently qualified observers, Jack Germond of the Baltimore Sun and the one and only David Broder of the Washington Post. Today, topping our list, President Bush's nominee for the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. Thomas made more courtesy calls on Capitol Hill today, seeking to win over senators who must vote to confirm him. While he was at it, he was also apologizing for having smoked marijuana while a college and law school student. Far more controversial, though, Thomas's strong conservative bent. The National Women's Political Caucus, especially worried about his abortion stance, is contemplating a resolution opposing him.
The man obviously has a tremendous personal story, which I would strongly suggest be made into a TV miniseries, but I don't know that that qualifies him for serving on the highest court in the land for the next 40 years.
Thomas's nomination has put many liberal and civil rights groups in an awkward position. They're not accustomed to passing judgment on a black conservative. Well, David, what do you think about that?
Well, the marijuana thing is a one-day story. I mean, when we start appointing people of this generation, as we discovered essentially with Douglas Ginsburg, you're going to find a lot of people who smoke marijuana, and I don't think anybody cares.
But the White House was smart about the way they handled it. They got it out early. On their initiative, they didn't wait for the press to uncover the fact, and I think Jack's right. If you remember back to the Ginsburg thing, it produced a kind of, first of all, the situation is not parallel. Ginsburg admitted using marijuana at a time when he was not just a college student, but I think a law professor. And
went into his law school days.
Right, and so the situation is different. But also, I think we learned something from last time. Do you remember the ridiculous business that happened after the
I was down in Florida. There was a Democratic gathering down there, and these presidential candidates were running to the microphone. Bruce Babbitt, Al Gore,
all admitting they
all the confessors. They had used marijuana, you know. And some of them...
you guys during that time.
We're the generation beyond.
I think there was some doubt about Al Gore because, first of all, nobody was ever sure that he was a young person at any point in his life, and second, if he was, he was likely a very straight arrow.
What about this liberal coalition that we're seeing here? And what kind of pressure is it coming under now as this Thomas nomination for wins its way through?
Well, that is a very serious problem for the liberal coalition in this sense. The civil rights leadership is in danger of losing some credibility, I think, particularly with other liberals and particularly with the women's group. Because they look at Thomas, they say that if this nominee were white, there'd be no question where you are. You won't say where you are. We think this is a terrible nominee. This is the women speaking, or the women's group, or the I shouldn't say women's group, I should say the pro-choice or the women's abortion rights group. And I think that if it ends up this way, there's going to be a lot of bad feeling between the various parts of that coalition.
David, what happens to the civil rights group and all of this? They're finding this a little bit rough going on.
They are, although I have to say, I think in the end they will probably decide they need to judge him on his record rather than the color of his skin.
Which they've already indicated they're pretty critical about.
That's right, and I think if they find, as this story unravels, that he is as determined to be opposed to their agenda as his past speeches and articles would lead you to believe, I don't think they have any choice but to oppose him, despite the fact that he's an African American.
And the White House is relishing this spectacle.
It's a no-lose proposition for the White House. Even in the extreme case, if the Senate Democrats should end up rejecting him, this was a tactically brilliant nomination on Bush's part.
The stakes are very important, Frank, for the Democratic liberals, and particularly Democratic liberal senators from the South who need black votes, who also are pro-choice, and who would like to be able to vote against Thomas in some cases, but need the cover of black opposition. The fact is, if the civil rights movement makes a decision against Thomas late, in the middle of August or something, it'll be too late to probably have any effect. But it does give them some cover, and that's what they need.
Now, while we're talking about this issue that touches on Thomas, the abortion issue, it obviously touches on just about everybody here in Washington. Certainly President Bush, and we had a rather unusual spectacle yesterday with the president in his news conference trying to find some way to finesse this business about this gag rule that is at issue now, and what kind of legislation he would support. Is he in a tough spot on this, or just, how do you explain that?
Well, what that showed is he can count. I mean, they looked at the vote in the House. There are enough votes in the House to override a veto on the gag rule, and they don't want to be embarrassed in that way, so they're trying to find some compromise.
It tells us one other thing, too. The story that I was told was that a couple of Republican senators who were normally very supportive of President Bush went to him and said, we want to know in advance, Mr. President, that we're not going to have to vote to override a veto if you stick with these regulations. And one of them, I'm told, said to him, the doctors of this country are really up in arms about this, and if you don't know that, you're not being told the straight story by your own staff.
So George
Bush heard the word doctors, so that's part of our constituency. Why are they up in arms, and said, we better take another look at what's going on here?
I'd like to move on to something else, and that is Bob Gates back in the news again, possibly having his confirmation hearings delayed, talk of reopening some discussion into this October surprise. We heard Sandy Crowley's piece a minute ago. What's going on up there on Capitol Hill? Is Iran-Contra and this whole bag something that just can't be dropped easily?
They keep hitting it with a shovel, but it won't die, It's one of those things that hangs on there. I'll tell you, I don't think the public cares about it at all. All the polling data that I've seen, and all you hear from politicians, is that people think, that happened a long time ago, let's forget it, and so forth. But this plea bargain with Alan Fires, the CIA official, has potential to get a little closer to the real truth about what happened. And we've all known, anybody who knew anything about Washington knows, that the story that this was just Poindexter North was baloney,
Finally, we're going to find out a little more. Probably not the whole story. Trouble?
Yes, he is. The hearings have been delayed now. The agency needs a head. I think people who are not partisan are concerned about what happens if you go for a long time without a director who's going to really run that agency. I think the president may very well have to face the question as to whether to go ahead with this nomination.
Almost out of time, but prediction time. October surprises, 1980 business, whether Ronald Reagan was involved in some kind of deal on the hostages. Yes or no on an investigation?
I'm still very skeptical about that. Sorry.
Jeff? No, sort of pro forma now. Jeff Fremont, David Broder, thanks very much. Next time we hope to start talking about some of the Democratic wannabes. Captain?
And coming up in the second half of The World Today, we'll meet the new leader of the fight to require AIDS tests for healthcare workers. She's a grandmother of 8, and she's got the HIV virus. And why these two priests are considered by some to be the Batman and Robin of Chicago's South Side.
The World Today continues, followed by Moneyline, next on CNN.
I'm on my way.
He's a man on the run. I want Tracy Jones! Trapped in one tight squeeze after another. He's the world's greatest detective. Tracy! And everyone out to get him.
I'm running it out. You're all right.
Warren Beatty is Dick Tracy.
Heat pumps have come on very strong lately, and the new technology has really enhanced the product. Now with the help from OG&E, the rebates that they're getting and the financing that they're getting is just unbeatable. That makes it fun for me to be in business, knowing that my customers are taken care of, and they're taken care of with the heat pump.
For more on heat pumps, this is CNN.
The push to require mandatory AIDS tests for healthcare workers is a very personal crusade for a Florida woman named Barbara Webb. CNN's Charles Jaco has her story.
Barbara Webb is a mother of 4, is a grandmother of 8, and is HIV positive. That means she will probably develop AIDS.
My initial reaction was, after the disbelief was over, that I had to keep on with my life.
Her life now revolves around her appointment book. Webb is speaking to reporters, talk shows, and state legislatures, anyone who will listen, as she spearheads a drive for mandatory AIDS tests for all doctors and dentists. Webb thinks she got the HIV virus from her dentist, Dr. David Acker. Dr. Acker died of AIDS last year after allegedly infecting 5 patients. Barbara Webb was one. 23-year-old Kimberly Bergalis was another. On July 1st, when this photo was taken, Bergalis was down to 60 pounds. She could no longer speak and no longer act as the driving force behind calls for mandatory AIDS testing.
Barbara Webb has taken this baton, taken this mantle, and is going forward.
What happened to Kim, what happened to me, can only stop if there is two-way mandatory testing where invasive procedures are concerned.
Two-way testing means AIDS tests for patients and healthcare professionals. The American Medical Association recently defeated a resolution calling for mandatory AIDS tests for physicians and nurses. The AMA instead endorses voluntary tests.
We are going to come back with some guidelines for testing for healthcare workers rather than focusing on a blunderbuss blanket type of testing, which we think is inappropriate and extraordinarily costly. But what they're really saying is leave me alone. I'm above all of this. I mean the organization, the AMA, and they're not.
A bill to require mandatory testing of all U.S. healthcare workers involved in invasive procedures has been introduced by California Congressman William Dannemeyer.
When we go to a medical practitioner in this country, we should have the right of assurance that we're not going to get a fatal disease.
But forces who support testing think their best hope is in state legislatures or with insurance companies. The idea is insurance carriers may start requiring mandatory AIDS tests in order for medical professionals to get malpractice insurance. And Barbara Webb will continue to speak to whoever will listen, demanding mandatory AIDS tests before it's too late for other patients, like Kimberly Bergala.
She was killed because of this stand that one does not have to admit that one has AIDS or that one is HIV positive. To me, it's murder.
Charles Jaco, CNN, Palm Bay, Florida.
Now news from these datelines in our world today. New York. A compromise is reached over home recording on digital audio recorders. Makers of high-quality recorders will pay royalties to songwriters, musicians, and record companies for revenue lost to taking. West Palm Beach, Florida. The state and federal governments agree on a plan to protect the Everglades from pollution. It includes setting aside 32,000 acres of land to filter out pollutants before they reach the wetlands. Chicago. 24-year-old Dirk Schiem of Germany is rescued from Lake Michigan after spending the last week drifting on an inflatable raft. He reportedly attended a 4th of July party on the lake, went out on the raft, and passed out. Osijek, Yugoslavia. Ethnic violence between Serbs and Croats in Croatia leaves at least 2 people dead, 4 wounded. Croatia's president is demanding that 2 federal army generals be fired for reportedly planning to crush secession movements by force. Franklin, Indiana. Vice President Dan Quayle's grandmother dies of natural causes. Martha Pulliam was 100 years old.
And among the stories still to come on the world today, the politics of profit in China. Whose business is it anyway? And a breeding ground for violence, with people in poverty trapped in a brutal conflict.
Sally Struthers for International Correspondence School.
Did you ever feel like this?
I hate my job, but there's nothing I can do about it.
That doesn't have to be true.
It's too late for me to change careers.
It's never too late to make a change for the better.
Sure, I dream about making more money.
While some people daydream, others change careers, win that promotion, or get their high school diploma, and ICS helps people just like you through home study courses, and they make it so easy to get free information. Just call this toll-free number for your personal career kit on the program you're most interested in. Choose from high school, TV, VCR repair, computer programming, child daycare, auto mechanics, bookkeeping, learning the personal computer, electrician, legal assistant, veterinary assistant, interior decorating, medical dental office, gun repair, secretary, journalism, art, conservation, drafting, hotel restaurant management, travel, fitness and nutrition, or get your degree in business management, accounting, or electronics. ICS has helped train millions of students at home, and you get all the materials you need as you need them, so you never have to set foot in a classroom.
It was so easy. ICS helped me qualify for a new career.
Paying through ICS was the best decision I've ever made.
A better income made all the difference in my life. Thanks, ICS.
So if you want a career, not just a job, or you want to make more money, ICS can be your answer, because you have what it takes.
Call now for the free information Sally Struthers spoke about. Then decide if you want to train at home for a better career to make more money for advance in your present job. Call 1-800-272-1100. Operators are on duty now to send you free information by return mail. Choose from any one of these exciting careers. That's 1-800-272-1100. Call now.
Now for a preview of what's coming up a bit later on Moneyline, here's Jan Hopkins. Jan? Thanks, Catherine. I'll be talking to Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady on the outlook for the U.S. and world economies. Pan Am, once a flagship U.S. carrier, is fast becoming one for the record book. And our continuing series, Hollywood USA. The focus tonight, Warner Brothers. Is parent Time Warner in the market for some overseas cash? Those stories and more on Moneyline at the top of the hour.
The Bush administration is plotting its strategy following yesterday's defeat in the House of Representatives for its China policy. The House adopted legislation that would permit China's most favored nation trading status to be renewed this year, but it would require progress on human rights and arms proliferation before allowing renewal next year. A Chinese spokesman calls the action a gross interference in China's internal affairs. Meanwhile, the administration opposes approving MFN status with any conditions, arguing that China will ignore attempts to coerce it into change. Some observers say despite the pressure already brought to bear, human rights abuses in China continue with little improvement. From Beijing now, CNN's Mike Chenoy.
The anniversary is over. The immediate tensions have eased. But a little more than 2 years after the Tiananmen Square crackdown, the human rights situation in China remains bleak, and according to many observers, is getting worse.
In terms of the general situation, the general legal process, the general amount of due process that people are getting in the system, it is, if anything, it's deteriorated in the last 2 years.
In recent months, the Chinese government has tried and sentenced several prominent Tiananmen Square activists, including student leader Wang Dan and dissident magazine editor Wang Juntao, and put intense pressure on others trying to speak out.
It's very dangerous for me to do this. I don't know what trouble will be happening, but I think some trouble will be happening.
No independent observers were allowed to attend the trials, which were held in this bleak Beijing courthouse. The prisoners' legal rights were severely limited.
The lawyer only has a few days to operate. He has a hard time finding evidence, getting people who would appear as witnesses. His activity during the trial is circumscribed. The defendant often has been abused by the coercive environment and sometimes by being physically abused, beaten, tortured.
There have also been allegations about the use of convicted dissidents and other prisoners as cheap labor to make products for export.
It's a policy objective of the Labor Reform Authority to use prison labor as a means of increasing foreign exchange earnings.
The Chinese leadership has described most of these charges as lies and distortions by outsiders meddling in China's internal affairs. But after what happened here in 1989, it is for the government in Beijing an uncomfortable fact that China's harsh domestic policies have now become a matter of international concern. Mike Chenoy, CNN, Beijing.
And in Peru, the return of democracy has not brought a halt in human rights abuse. If anything, it's gotten worse. There are millions of people are trapped between poverty and brutality. CNN's Lucia Newman reports.
The list is long, so the names are read out quickly, of people whose faces are seen only on these posters, distributed to relatives desperate to know where they are, dead or alive.
The Marines, they raided our house one night and took my son away. We never saw him again, and now I'm alone with no one to support me.
The story is repeated over and over. Here in Ayacucho, the peasants have endured much of the massacres, disappearances, and tortures that have made Peru one of the most brutal societies in the world.
Witnesses saw what happened to my husband. They burned him alive with gasoline.
The police and army are charged with carrying out mass slaughters of peasants, including children, in their fight to crush Peru's Maoist Shining Path guerrilla movement. The rebels, in turn, are regarded as the most violent in the hemisphere.
We know that the subversives are the first ones to break with order, but when the state responds, it must do so within the framework of respect for the human being.
Respect for the human being is a concept alien to these children who survive on the meal they get at this Ayacucho soup kitchen. All of them have lost at least one parent, arrested on charges of subversion and never seen again.
We go ask the local authorities every day, but nobody tells us where our father is.
Officials say they're working on it.
We know there have been human rights violations and abuses of authority, but we're committed to taking severe measures against police and soldiers who commit such violations.
The irony is that the deterioration of the human rights situation here has coincided with the return of democracy to this country. In just over 11 years of civilian rule, Peru has fallen deeper and deeper into poverty, the breeding ground of so much violence. For millions of poor Peruvians, the new government's vow to fight guerrillas' influence through urban and rural development have amounted to little more than empty promises. Social and economic justice, say experts, is the only way out.
Democracy must be credible. Democracy must show it can deliver. It takes time, but it must be done.
But in a country submerged in what's become a structural violence, these women of Ayacucho can only wonder whether things will change enough for them to ever see their missing loved ones again. Lucia Newman, CNN, Ayacucho.
And when the world today returns, nearing the bottom of the barrel of the world's oil reserve. Headline News, I'm Chuck Roberts with the
When you need news from around the world, turn to CNN Headline News at the top and bottom of every hour for complete updates. CNN Headline News. Anytime, all the time. A mild case of athlete's foot is one thing. A really tough case, that's something else. The irritating itch, the painful cracking, the burning. That's when you want a medicine that acts tough. Tough-actin Tinactin. Tinactin cures even the tough cases of athlete's foot fungus. And Tinactin's clinically proven. No wonder it's the antifungal most recommended by pharmacists. So when you've got a tough case of athlete's foot, get the medicine that acts tough. Tough-actin Tinactin.
Attention, advanced photographers. You're witnessing something never possible before. The miracle of microfine grain. For the sharpest detail in color print film. Kodak presents X-Tar film.
Tonight, the computer industry is targeting a new market, and the customers are usually more interested in mud pies and modems. How toddlers are going from diapers to databases. On CNN's Prime News, 8 p.m. Eastern tonight.
Monica Seles didn't show for the opening day of Wimbledon. The world wants to know why. Jim Huber may have some information. Jim?
Inquiring minds. Is she pregnant? Is she injured? Is she injured and pregnant? One of the most intriguing mysteries in recent sport will be answered in part, and thank goodness, in New Jersey when Monica Seles finally shows up at a tennis tournament. Number one player in the women's world who so abruptly pulled out of Wimbledon just 3 days before it starts and who was fined $6,000 for it. Says she's going to play next week at the Mawa tournament in New Jersey. She went into seclusion immediately upon leaving London, which prompted, of course, the unanswered rumors. Meanwhile, tonight in Ottawa, the Toronto Argonauts launched the Canadian Football League season with their Rockets still on the pad. The great Notre Dame star Rocket Ismail, who passed up the NFL to sign an $18 million deal in Toronto this year, is still suffering from a leg injury. Will have to sit out tonight's opener. His presence so important to the revival of that league, and being out isn't much fun for him either.
Unless I was told that face-to-face, I don't give any weight to those. All of the players that I talked to have all been basically do what it takes to get well. We understand the position. We understand it's frustrating. You want to get out there, and it's just a matter of time. Don't rush anything that can be taken care of now, and it can prevent prolonging the injury and prolonging not being able to play.
Rocket Ismail likely will make his debut a week from tonight at home against Hamilton. Meanwhile, baseball returns to its business tonight after the All-Star break, and two of the hottest teams from the first half meet right away. Texas will be at Toronto, and one of the keys, of course, for the Blue Jays all season long is Bill Carter.
But we need to keep our intensity, keep getting the quality pitching, play good defense, and get some timely hitting. But if we just continue doing what we've been doing, we'll be successful because we're confident and we believe in what we have.
Highlights from tonight's game, the rest of a full slate of baseball, plus a look at the changing college bowl formula. CNN Sports tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. Catherine?
Thanks, Jim. Atlantic Richfield has announced a breakthrough in clean-burning gasoline, but it says it won't manufacture it unless other companies are required to as well. It's a reformulated unleaded gas called ECX for Emission Control Experimental. ALCO claims if everyone in California used the gas, it would be like taking 8 million vehicles off the roads every day. But the new fuel costs 16 cents more a gallon. ALCO says at that price, consumers wouldn't buy it unless other gas companies are required to use the formula too, under tough new state emission laws due this fall.
The Gulf War raised concerns about dependence on Persian Gulf oil. A new report indicates those concerns may indeed be well-founded. It says there's only so much oil in the world. Virtually all of it has been discovered now, and the Middle East has most of it. Andrea Fleischer explains.
No matter how much we drill and how hard we look,
Some experts say we probably won't find much new oil. According to a study in this week's Science magazine, all the world's major crude oil reserves have already been discovered. Scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey say that means 20 years from now, the Middle East will continue to dominate world oil production.
I want people to understand that it is a resource reality, that there are limitations out there, that you can't just go out and continually find more and more oil and gas in large quantities as we did a decade or two ago. Those days are past in our judgment.
While today the United States, Soviet Union, and other non-OPEC countries control nearly two-thirds of world oil production, researchers predict by 2010 that piece of the pie will shrink dramatically as OPEC production doubles and the Middle East pumps more than half the world's oil.
A very few countries or areas are responsible or have the occurrence of most of the world's oil and gas. And most of the rest of the world doesn't have anywhere nearly as much oil and gas.
But according to an umbrella group representing geological organizations, the report's conclusions are premature and, in the long term, overly pessimistic.
The problem worldwide is that there are a number of major basins that may contain significant reserves that don't have enough holes poked on them to do a good modeling job.
But there is no argument among geologists that oil exploration needs to continue, along with major efforts to mass-produce new sources of energy. The bottom line is that there's only so much oil in the world, and eventually it will run out. Andrea Fleischer for CNN, Washington.
Science and Technology Today is brought to you by the people at AT&T. AT&T, the right choice.
Jack Shea and Partners used to be in a skyscraper. Jack is Tokyo. Now it's next to a dairy farm.
Mr. Hasegawa.
Eating out has taken on a whole new meaning. But if the pace is slower, business is not. With AT&T, international data moves fast, and AT&T video conferencing is a smart alternative to overseas travel. And that's helping business a lot more than a fancy address.
Jack, need a lift? Nah, I think I'll walk.
A world of help from AT&T.
On CNN tonight, one of the big guns in Hollywood's heyday, but how is Warner Brothers faring today on Moneyline? Then, the valid science efforts for wasted tax dollars. The U.S. space station mimics Foxfire. All tonight on CNN.
I knew something must be wrong. I was getting these sharp pains, and sometimes pressure and bloating. I'm glad I asked my doctor. He said it was gas and recommended Mylicon.
Mylantis Mylicon gas. It has the best medicine for gas.
Here's news. If your athlete's foot won't go away, you could have more than athlete's foot. You could have a secondary yeast infection. That's right, yeast.
Only Mycotin cures both athlete's foot and secondary yeast infections with Myconazole. Step up to the Mycotin.
If you're looking to maintain regularity, look here. There's a drug-free way to do it, and Kellogg's All Bran can be an important part. Because a high-fiber diet, including Kellogg's All Bran, can give you the fiber you need to help stay regular, drug-free. And All Bran goes a lot better with berries. A high-fiber diet and Kellogg's All Bran for drug-free regularity.
Two priests, one black, one white, working together, they wowed the south side of Chicago with a crusade of their own, upsetting the status quo and even getting arrested. CNN's Margaret Lowry explains their mission and why the evangelical pair is partying.
A priestly dynamic duo.
We are going to call for a massive boycott.
An evangelical Batman and Robin. But this Batman, known as Father George Clement, is leaving Robin, known as Father Michael Flager, and Gotham, in this case the south side of Chicago, will never be the same.
The thing that I look back with most satisfaction is that you can't get that drug paraphernalia anymore, and the reason you can't is because Mike Flager and I decided enough.
And we both saw drugs ravaging our communities. That became the time that we decided to truly link up.
But a selling sites like this over here, drug paraphernalia?
So a few years ago, these priests from two separate South Side parishes started raiding neighborhood stores with attendant publicity. The sale of drug paraphernalia is now illegal here. Just one of their victories. Father Clement's activism began when Martin Luther King was murdered in 1968.
I was no longer that nice little street-colored priest. Now I became the subversive, the radical, the militant, the whoever. And I never looked back.
But after 34 years on the South Side, 22 in this parish alone, Father Clement decided to move on.
I don't think he's leaving his activism. I don't think he can. I think as long as he's alive and breathing, he's going to be an activist.
More than priests, super priests, collared crusaders for the little guy, for minorities and those oppressed by poverty, racism, violence, and drugs. They step in where government, political, community leaders, the system itself, fails. They've painted over cigarette and liquor billboards in Chicago's impoverished black neighborhoods. They've been arrested together. The most recent caper taking on G. Heilemann Brewing over its plans to introduce a more potent malt liquor. They've waged a relentless war on drugs with every tool at hand, together. But the next stop on Father Clement's holy itinerary is a Trappist monastery in Kentucky.
I'm mad at him. He has a lot of nerve leaving.
And when I look back upon these years, probably one of the most difficult things that I'll have to do is the fact that I won't be involved in working as a duo with him.
Meaning Father Flagler, of course, not the Holy One. That partnership continues.
I'm going to be praying for the success of Mike Flagler and other activists out here, priests, ministers, rabbis, whoever they are. I'm going to be praying for them.
Margaret Lowry, CNN, Chicago.
And that concludes this edition of The World Today at CNN Center in Atlanta. I'm Catherine Cryer. Good night, Frank.
Good night, Catherine. By the way, no one was eclipsed today by that thing with the sun. In Washington, I'm Frank Sesno. Moneyline with Jan Hopkins is next. Here's a preview of what's coming up, Jan.
Thanks, Frank. Secretary of the Treasury, Nicholas Brady, will be joining us with his outlook for the U.S. and world economies. What next for bankrupt Pan Am? The once giant carrier breaking up. And a look at Warner Brothers in tonight's installment of Hollywood USA. An all-American movie studio goes global. Those stories and more in 1 minute.